Nera rubbed her manipulating appendages together excitedly as she skittered down the halls of the space station, her sectoid legs making soft tip-taps on the stainless steel floor. Her two large emerald compound eyes absorbed all the information around her as she dodged another Krier, their lobster-like abdomens scraping against each other. They raised their mantis-like bladed arms in annoyance, and she wiggled her antennae back in apology. She was in too much of a hurry to offer a proper apology. The new species was here to see her work, and she needed to be prepared. Her mandibles clicked together as she thought about the new members of the Galactic stage. Not unlike the Vero, they were mammalian. However, they were much smaller. The tops of their furry heads barely reached her people's lower stomachs, right at the center of her grasping appendages. Yet she had heard that they were so dense that even a warrior couldn't budge them when running full tilt. It was perplexing until she learned they hailed from a Category 13 death world with 4.5 times the gravity of their home world, the highest rating any planet harboring sentient life had ever received. Sure, there were the NOA from a Category 8 death world, but they were still relatively normal. One of her colleagues had mentioned that their scientists said if their gravity were any higher, they would not have made it off their planet, and that it was difficult as it was to leave the atmosphere. But that wasn't the strangest thing about them. Nera had gotten her manipulators on a pamphlet describing their anatomy, something all the other members of the galactic community had reluctantly shared only after many rotations. Their anatomy was overbuilt in her opinion. They had one head, a common trait among the community, but their brain was split into two hemispheres. They had two eyes, but their eyes had 6 muscles that moved their irises. Then there was their breathing system, a strange way of moving oxygen around their bodies with things called lungs, sacs of flesh that expanded and diffused oxygen into their bloodstream, which was iron-based instead of copper like hers. They needed far less oxygen than the Krier and many other species. In fact, their atmosphere only had 21% oxygen, 20% less than anyone else. It was insane and made Nera's elongated head spin. She shook her head as she stopped in front of the red airlock, where she was meant to meet her guests. She could think about their crazy anatomy later. Right now, she needed to focus on presenting her work. She was quite proud of it. V should be nearly done showing them the lab. I should make a grand entrance. Nera clacked her mandibles together loudly to get the attention of their guests. Bree turned first, her 9 eyes facing in all directions atop her fuzzy body. The humans, she thought they were called, turned afterward and almost immediately jumped backward, their eyes dilating to pinpoints. One of the 3 placed an appendage at their hip, looking for something that wasn't there. This one had a thick bar of fur above its mouth, stark white and seemingly well-groomed. The fur on the top of its head was also white, smooth back and glistening in the light of the planet below and the lights above. "It's a xenomorph," one of them whispered, their gruff voice not translating well through the translator. One of them turned entirely white, a seemingly younger human in a green suit. He kind of looked like a cron leaf, his face hairless while his head was adorned with bright gold fur. Muttering to the one next to him, he said, "Listen, if I get face hugged, shoot me, just shoot me." The one in green muttered to the one in gray, whose face turned bright green. The one being spoken to was swallowing hard and shaking, possibly a fear response. He had less hair than his older companion, but had a small patch of fur on his chin and no fur on his head. Nera tilted her head and slowly clicked at them in a confused way, swiveling her elongated head almost entirely around before looking back at the humans. She hadn't known they could change color. Fascinating. "I do not know what a xenomorph is. I don't see anyone in the vicinity other than myself and my colleague here," she stated simply, watching their reaction. Their chests seemed to rise and fall slowly as they took a closer look at her. The older human with the fur above its mouth looked at her with predatory eyes, slowly gliding along her entire length, making her antennae stand on end. It wasn't a good sensation, and she was glad when it ended. "You're right. I apologize. You look very similar to a monster from one of our old horror movies, but you're very different." Nera rubbed her striking appendages together as she took several steps forward, towering over the humans. The young one in the green suit turned an even paler white as she did, taking several steps back himself. Strange, he could probably rip off her legs easily. How so? I don't want this to impact the demonstration. If I can alleviate any misunderstanding, I will, she said, gesturing to the other two. The older human seemed much calmer now, stroking the hair above his lip and looking up at her as he spoke. Well, to start, your head is tubular, which is very much like said species. Nothing you can do about that. Then there's your back. You have biomechanical tubes poking out at about the right spots like they do, and your carapace is nearly pitch black, he stated matter-of-factly, extending a small grasping appendage as he counted off each similarity. Each point made the white human shake harder, his eyes never leaving her. But you have mantis-like bladed arms above your grasping appendages, and a more lobster-like lower half, as well as pretty large mandibles over your mouth. And you have eyes, which they don't have. So my own colleagues need to calm down and shape up? The human shouted the last line more at his companions rather than at Nera. Both of them snapped to a more upright position. He nodded and turned back to her, extending an appendage towards her own. I'm sorry about our conduct. It was a knee-jerk reaction. We were given a briefing on who we would be meeting, but honestly, I wasn't paying much attention to anything other than the mention of stealth ships. He made a soft, strange chuffing sound as he looked up at her, seemingly waiting for something. She looked down at him and simply stared, absorbing this information. So she was frightening to them, and there wasn't much she could do about it. Unfortunate, but maybe she would get to see more of those fascinating reactions. What are you doing with your appendage? She asked, pointing to it with her own manipulators. The human looked down at his hand, then back to her, keeping his appendage held out. It's a handshake. It's a formal greeting from my species, he grunted, leaning forward and taking her manipulator in his hand. You move it up and down like this. Nera slowly mimicked the movement until their appendages separated, the older human's lips curling up and showing his teeth. It made her antenna twitch again, and she pulled her manipulator back to herself. Interesting. Well, I'm Nera, the head scientist of research and development here at the station. You're here for a demonstration of our newest stealth technology, aren't you? She clicked coyly, watching them as she skipped right ahead to the beginning of the presentation. The older human's eyes narrowed as the two younger ones smoothed their suits. The one in green no longer a pale white, and the one in gray a more pink color now. Yes, we are. Strange way to jump into the conversation, he growled, the translator still having trouble picking up his voice. Don't be a grumpy bastard, Todd. She's a scientist, not a door-to-door salesman. The eggheads at home are just as awkward, the one in green bluntly told the older human. Todd was his name, apparently. Nera was loving all this new information she was getting about the humans. Todd slowly looked back at the man in green without emoting, a grin plastered on the human in green's face as he grunted. Fair enough. Guess I should cut her some slack. His chest expanded and shrank again before he flung his arm outward, gesturing for Nera to move forward, or so she assumed. It was quite similar to the Viro's gesture of get on with it. All right, lead the way, Miss Nera. Nera excitedly turned and clicked twice towards Bree, who squealed back and hopped away. This was Nera's show, and V knew that as she disappeared behind the airlock, she herself sauntered through. She turned towards the window and pulled out a data pad, tapping a few spots on its surface. Well, it's a good thing we have this amazing view, isn't it? Great backdrop for some science, she exclaimed excitedly as 4 long ships started coming around the edge of the planet. They looked almost like spearheads with crescent wings sprouting from their back ends. The sharp tips pointed towards the front, their silvery surfaces sparkling in the light of the planet. One of the humans made a high-pitched sound beside her as the ships grew closer. Well, I'll give you this. Your vessels are beautiful, the human in gray muttered, eyes finally looking away from her as his gaze locked onto the ships. Todd seemed to stroke the fur above his lip again. Nera was starting to suspect it was a habit he had when he was thinking and also appeared to be appreciating the ships. They slowly came to a stop several clicks away from the station, far enough not to be affected by its gravitational pull. The grav generator did strange things to ships under a certain size when they got too close. But I'm not seeing much stealth, Todd grunted, turning to Nera with an expectant look. She bounced up and down in agreement, her flared tail slapping the ground with light thunks. Yes, their stealth modules are currently offline. I was hoping we could show off the rest of their abilities first. They are the first of their class, built by my people after all, she said mischievously. In all honesty, she just wanted to show off the work of her and her colleagues. They had all put their minds together for many rotations to make these ships, and that made her quite proud of her team. What other features are you going to show off? I thought this whole trip was to see your stealth modules, not to watch you show off. I'm missing the Battle B finale for this. Todd turned towards the one in green, who had seemingly struck a nerve, walking over with heavy clanks echoing from the metal floor as his much denser body put more stress on it. Jeremy, let the lady show off her toys. You're already here. You can't miss your stupid show anymore. Todd struck the back of Jeremy's head, a popping sound coming from the impact as Jeremy rubbed the spot, wincing in pain and making a face. Todd then looked at the human in gray. Got anything to add, Walker? He growled. Walker shook his head hurriedly, raising his manipulating appendages and waving them. Nope, nothing, sir. I'd love to see the other features this lovely lady worked on, he answered back quickly, making Nera tilt her head curiously. These humans were truly fascinating, and if she could, she'd study them all day, but she needed to continue. Thank you, Todd. Well, we worked on quite a few things for these ships, like the new propulsion system, she said, tapping her appendage on her datapad. A buzzing sound came from it as she connected her communicator to one of the ships outside, typing quickly. Please move 30 cricks up at full speed, she commanded. She let go of the button and watched as the furthest ship on the left's back end slowly turned downwards, almost swiveling like her own head. The ship shot upward suddenly, reaching 30 cricks in only a few minutes. Todd let out a noise the translator couldn't quite interpret. Nera turned and looked at him, her mandibles rubbing together as the ship came to a stop. We've improved the movement speed, shortening the time from 8 time units to move 30 cricks to only 6 units. It was quite a bit of work. The gravitational force on the pilots was harsh, until V was able to use a bit of her knowledge to improve the dampeners. Jeremy looked at Todd, who seemed to be silent, then to Walker, who was biting his lip with his teeth. Another oddity of humans, but so were everyone's methods of eating. You can't be serious, Jeremy said in utter disbelief. What do you mean, Jeremy? Nera asked, her emerald eyes shimmering with disbelief. The humans had to be impressed by this. She and her team had shaved 2 whole time units off their maneuvering time. This isn't fast. It was like watching your ships move through molasses. Our ships would fly, Jeremy retorted. Todd smacked Jeremy on the back of the head again, this time sounding much more painful. Even Nera flinched a bit as Jeremy hit the ground hard. Don't be an idiot, was all Todd grunted before clearing his throat and nodding to Nera for her to continue. She was picking up on cues much better now, she hoped. They were very similar to other species, just all mixed together. Well, she clicked, pushing the button on her datapad again, the buzz emanating from it as she connected to another ship. She didn't say anything out loud but sent a message. We have our new plasma cannons, she shouted proudly, her clicks ending as the next ship in line's underside slowly lowered, a long barrel extending outward. A bright rainbow light shot forward, smashing into a small asteroid 10 cricks wide. It became red-hot slag, flaking off and entering the planet's atmosphere below, where they would safely burn up and dissipate. She had been careful to have them target a smaller one. Well, that was pretty cool, Walker said with a tight voice, nodding to himself. He raised an eyebrow as the barrel slowly folded in on itself and vanished back into the underside of the ship. What? No encore? Nera gave him a disbelieving look, her mandibles spreading apart and her blade-like appendages hanging down, the tips of them resting on the ground. No, they need time to recharge. They use quite a bit of energy, and using them too fast could cause them to melt the ship. She pointed towards the not-so-shiny surface of the underside, some of the plating having been burned by the cannon. Really? Jeremy commented. Todd gave him a scowl, which shut him up quickly. But this time, Walker jumped into the conversation instead, continuing where he left off. "That's it? We could have blown that asteroid to smithereens and then some with our ship. And we have a diplomatic ship that's pretty under—" Todd smacked him on the back of the head, which seemed to be a habit of Todd's. These three must be very familiar with one another if they were so comfortable showing off their strength and willingness to use force around her. "If you say another word, I'm going to wax your entire body and make you go to your wedding that way," Todd muttered. Walker turned pale like Jeremy had earlier. "You wouldn't." Todd's face was deadly serious as he spluttered. Walker quickly fell silent as Todd gestured for Nera to continue again. Nera was starting to think nothing was going to impress them. Well, besides the stealth modules, she hoped. "I suppose we should continue," she clacked, slowly pushing the communications button yet again. This time, the next ship's wings slowly folded in on themselves until there were nothing but a spearhead floating in space. In a flash of light, the silvery form stretched like a rubber band until it disappeared, leaving behind a puff of silvery gas. "Was that an FTL jump? I thought you couldn't jump that close because of the warp bubble." Walter, Jeremy, and even Todd seemed impressed this time, each of their faces contorting into different expressions. Yes, that was the reaction Nera had been looking for. It was gloriously fascinating to examine their faces, the lines of their skin doing things her body simply never could. "You are correct. The warp bubbles usually would rip the ship apart if you were using any other FTL drive. But by implementing some of the same principles as our grav generator, we've managed to make short-distance jumps not only possible but cost-effective," she explained. Nera tapped something into her datapad as a silvery shard flashed by the station. The ship that had just vanished reappeared a few CCS away from one of the others, its wings folding back out as it maneuvered its way back into place. Another puff of silvery gas appeared where it had re-entered. "That's actually amazing. We've been looking for something like that. The higher-ups have been complaining about needing to be halfway to the Kuiper Belt before jumping out or in," Todd commented, his blue eyes gleaming with interest. Nera's antennae waved up and down happily as she rubbed her manipulating appendages together, a soft shuffling sound emanating from them as her carapace rubbed together. She had thought the plasma cannon would have been their favorite so far, but this was wonderful. "Yes, we are also looking for a solution to that problem. I'm happy to have finally caught your interest. I suppose we should get on to the main show then." She excitedly glided her appendage upwards on the datapad, the ships shimmering as their stealth modules began to power up. Slowly, they vanished from her view front to back, their forms becoming invisible. "So when were you going to activate the module? The ships got pretty flashy there for a moment," Todd asked, merrily shattering Nera's train of thought. She looked at Todd, a merry look on his face as he stared out the window. No, they couldn't see them. It shouldn't be possible." "Yeah, I can kind of see a slight shimmer around the ships now, though. Maybe they're powering up? Makes sense. Probably draws a lot of power or is heavy on the onboard computers." Jeremy had leaned towards Walter, his tone much more uplifted now, his appendages stuffed into some folds of cloth around his waist as his eyes stayed locked onto the spot where the ships had been. "I don't know, but yeah, I see it too. Kind of like a thin layer of glass that's wobbling around the body." "Kind of cool looking," Walter answered, his eyes following the same spot. Nera was in disbelief. The camouflage had been perfect. Even the high-yield scanning equipment hadn't spotted the ships when they had tested them. "You must be playing a prank on me. The ships have completely vanished," she clacked shakily, barely getting the words past her mandibles. "What? No, they're right there. You've got to be kidding me," Todd said in disbelief, pointing out the window towards where the ships had vanished. Nera slowly typed into the datapad with her appendage, Todd's face frowning as his fingers slowly raised upwards, following something she couldn't see. "Doctor, please, we aren't fools. They're right there," Jeremy joined in, pointing at the same spot. Nera's head was spinning, her carapace tight, and she could barely see her surroundings. She collapsed onto the floor heavily, her body leaning against the cold wall as she looked at all three of the humans in front of her. "The stealth modules are active." She turned the datapad showing the status of the ships, pointing towards the green slider with her appendage. All three of their faces had the same expression, a slightly ajar mouth with squinting eyes. No, there's no way! You're messing with us, aren't you? Jeremy stated furiously, throwing his hands up in the air. He was scowling now, reminding her of Todd quite a lot, actually. He had the same folds of skin around his eyes when he scowled. You're messing with us. You have to be. There's no way your stealth amounts to a shiny ship with a kind of cool shimmer. There's no way I'm missing battle bots for this shitty stealth. He ranted as Nera slowly turned the sliders down. Todd and Walter watched intently as there was another flash, and the ships came back into view, back to front, their magnificent hulls shimmering once again in the light, elegant and beautiful, hanging in the void above the planet like silver birds. I think she's serious, Jeremy, Walter interjected into Jeremy's rant, shaking his shoulders rather roughly. Nera watched the muscles flex and move under the skin as he did, distracted by the strange movement for a moment while she tried to reconcile with this information. Her work for the past few rotations was useless. The humans saw them just as clearly as they did when the modules were off. You shouldn't be able to see them at all. We reduced the wavelength of light that reflects off the surface of our ships to the 450 nanocrick range. No one should be able to see them. Nera clacked nervously, checking her datapad. The ship's reflectors had shortened the wavelengths to 430 nirks, into the invisible range of color for every species on the Galactic Council, except the humans, apparently. Todd gave her a small, comforting look before clapping his appendages together. All right, boys, so the stealth modules are a bust. There was always the chance they were going to be. Todd nodded as he also butted in, all three of them turning and looking towards him as he spoke. And spectacularly. That doesn't mean the trip was worthless. All three of them tilted their heads, Todd gesturing outside and giving a small smile. Ah, that's what it was called, Nera finally remembered. The FTL jump tech. It would make us far more difficult to hit, track. Hell, it would even give us an upper hand against 90% of the galaxy. But Todd, we came here for stealth tech. What would we tell the bigwigs at home? Oops, sorry guys. Turns out we just have way too good eyesight. Their stealth sucks. Oh yeah, but see this FTL drive? Todd nodded, Nera simply watching at this point. Messages starting to pile up on her datapad from the pilots outside, asking for coordinates to go or for something to do. That's exactly what we tell them. They have been looking for a better FTL drive anyway. So the stealth drive sucks, boo-hoo. Since when have we ever had luck in our favor? Both of the other humans gave a bit of a smirk before they all began barking together. Or wait, was this laughter? Nera assumed it was laughter. Otherwise, these humans had just gone insane in front of her, which, given they could absolutely rip her apart, would be very bad news for her. Well, should we head to the negotiation chamber then? Nera clicked weakly, the three humans nodding at each other and helping her onto her many legs. Lead the way, Doctor. I'm sure we can work something out. Months later, General Karnya had not believed the report Nera had sent to him, calling her a liar and a dirty traitor. There was no way the ships that had made her so proud of the research and development team had been so utterly and completely useless against their greatest threat. She tried to explain that the human visual spectrum was so much wider than theirs that reducing the wavelength like she had would do nothing to inhibit them. Karna had simply screeched into her face. When she lied, the entire galactic community couldn't see those ships. He forced her to resign, ordered a personal ship to be built for himself, and went to prove her a fool. He warped to the edge of Sol's space to prove a point that he was going to sneak past all their detection methods from the very edge of their home system. So very confident, he was unseen, undetected. He kept his confidence as he passed Neptune with no resistance, sending messages back to the Career Council of his successful infiltration, constantly berating Nera's idiotic report. They must have been faking it, just an extremely lucky guess as to where the ships were, ignoring that she had spent several rotations to make this stealth module, giving her no reason to lie. His confidence only grew as he glided past Saturn again with no resistance. However, as he slowly approached Jupiter, he began to feel as if he was being watched. He could see slight shimmers at the edge of his vision as he grew closer to the massive gas giant, almost imperceptible. He could see much more activity here, a large metal ring slowly rotating around one of its moons. And then, without warning, he was promptly obliterated in a hail of explosions, his ship just pretty shrapnel floating around one of Sol's gas giants. The last words he heard moments before his death were, "We see you." This concludes our exploration of Nera's incredible technology and the unexpected human resilience. If this story of groundbreaking scientific achievement and interstellar intrigue captivated you, show your support by leaving a like. Comment with the word discovery if you were fascinated by the technological advancements. And don't forget to subscribe if you believe in the power of science and unity. Your engagement drives our passion to share more cosmic tales. Thank you for being a part of this galactic journey.